Take a look at these two buildings. Now, which is taller? If you guess the one on the right, you'd be wrong. Okay, how about an easier one? These two. Any guesses? It is, of course, the Lotwell Tower, although if we took it to the usable height, then it would be this one.
Confused? You should be.
You see, the world's tallest buildings aren't all they seem, because for decades now, architects have been using a very clever set of tricks to juice the heights of the world's tallest buildings. And as the next tallest building on our planet marks the construction of its 100th floor, it got us thinking, how big will it actually be?
So we've picked 6 skyscrapers that really stretch the rules of height to find out what tallest building actually means.
First off, here's one for all you millennials out there. The Petronas Towers. They're a bit of a forgotten giant nowadays, but man, what a nostalgia trip. Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones used them as a jungle gym, they were in video games, and they even got dropped on London in a completely unnecessary sequel to Independence Day.
They like to get the landmarks.
But more than any of that, the Petronas Towers were the world's tallest building from 1998 to 2004. It was a huge moment of pride for the people of Malaysia, but not everyone was so happy. You see, the building it relegated into second place was this, the Willis Tower, or the Sears Tower as it was called back then. It had held the top spot since 1974, and Chicagoans were feeling a bit robbed. Because...
See the problem?
Now, you might think the height is measured to the top of the antenna, here. Or at least to the top of the roof, here. Either way, the Willis Tower wins. Right? Wrong. So wrong, in fact, that in 1996, as the Petronas Towers were nearing completion, a delegation of incensed Chicago journalists demanded an answer.
So they went to the keepers of the official list of tallest buildings, the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, now renamed to the Council on Vertical Urbanism.
Strangers from distant lands, friends of old.
Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing. Anyway, despite all the protests, the council was perfectly clear. Buildings are, and always have been, measured from the street level up to the architectural top of the building.
These antennas on top of the Willis Tower have nothing to do with the architecture or the structure of the building. They're TV masts that were added on after it was built, and they were never included in its height. These spires on top of the Petronas Tower, on the other hand, don't serve a function, but they are a deliberate architectural feature of the building, and as such they take the overall height to 451.9 metres.
Great news for anyone who, and I'm just spitballing here, wanted to buy a penthouse in the tallest building on Earth. A penthouse that could look like this. A few chairs over here, guest bedroom, ensuite bathroom. Yeah, that'll do. Oh, sorry, I should say this isn't the actual penthouse. It's just one I've designed myself using Rayon design. For all you architects and interior designers out there, Rayon Design is the next generation CAD platform that's been designed to fit the way you want to work in 2026. It's fully web-based, so your entire team can work off the same model in real time. If I need a CAD block of a desk, for example, I can just search their library of 50,000 blocks and place it in my design in seconds. And if it's not quite right, I can create my own in no time at all thanks to Rayon's AI feature. I've used Rayon Design to create a fancy penthouse, but you can use it for any kind of commercial or residential project. I seriously rate Rayon because it does everything you need in one unified platform. Precise technical drawings, stylized client presentations, even procurement all stays synchronized through its single source of truth model. But don't just take my word for it. If you want to step up your workflow and help us to continue to make these awesome videos, then click the link below or scan the QR code on screen to try out Rayon Design for yourself for free today. Now, rules are rules, but the whole episode caused such a stink that the council introduced 2 additional sets of criteria for measuring the height of skyscrapers.
The coveted Tallest Building Award would still go to the one with the highest architectural height, but a record would also be kept of the highest occupied floor and the highest point of anything connected to the building. But instead of settling the matter, that was just the start. In at number 2 is Merdeka 118, just a stone's throw across Kuala Lumpur from the Petronas Towers. When it completed in 2024, it entered the rankings as the world's second tallest building, nudging China's Shanghai Tower down to third. And Chinese commentators were surprisingly fine with that.
I'm kidding. They were absolutely furious.
Okay, here we go again. This is Merdeka 118, and this is the Shanghai Tower. Thanks to that spire, Merdeka tops out at a neat 678.9 metres, blasting past the Shanghai Tower. Surely this is really pushing it. The highest floor in Merdeka is here, just above 500 metres up. The Shanghai Tower has a restaurant on floor 120, over 50 metres higher. If the two were next to each other, you could literally have lunch in the Shanghai Tower and look down on the roof of Merdeka 118. And yet, that building would be taller. Well, as strange as it sounds, the same rules apply. Merdeka's spire is architecturally integral to the building.
But we do actually have a term for things like this: vanity height.
Measure from the highest occupiable floor to the architectural peak of the building, and you have its vanity height. Vanity height can come in all shapes and sizes, and today almost no skyscraper would be seen without one, including the Shanghai Tower, whose architectural tip sits 48 metres above its highest usable floor. Although that's nothing compared to Merdeka, which has a whopping 176 metres of vanity height. Now, there are a lot of reasons why a building might have some vanity height, and Merdeka's is very particular. That unusual position of the spire refers to the iconic silhouette of the country's founder as he declared independence, or Merdeka, back in 1957.
Vanity height isn't the most flattering name, and you might well see it as a way of cheating the height of a building, but Merdeka's advocates would think the opposite. They'd see it as completely legitimate and as a way of marking a really foundational moment in their nation's history. Now, regardless of what you might think of that, what is clear is that we're in a completely different ballgame to the Petronas Towers and their 46-metre spires.
That's down to a bigger shift in what skyscrapers are for. But to get to the bottom of that, we need to head to Dubai, home to the world's vainest building, the Burj Khalifa.
Fun fact, that also got dropped into London in Independence Day too.
They like to get the landmarks.
Now, there's no doubt that by any measure, this is the tallest building on the planet. It comfortably wins the Triple Crown for architectural height, height to tip, and highest occupiable floor. And with a gap of 242 metres between this mechanical floor and the tip of the spire, the Burj Khalifa holds the record for the biggest vanity height of any building on Earth. In fact, if you took just this part of the building and planted it in Manhattan, it would still dominate the New York skyline. But that really kind of misses the point, because skyscrapers have become so much more than buildings.
The first skyscrapers were born out of necessity, rising in crowded cities where buildings invariably had to make the most of the small plots of land they usually found themselves rising on. But if we rewind to the 2000s, when the Burj Khalifa was being built, Dubai wasn't yet a bustling metropolis. There was no land scarcity. This was a quiet, sparsely populated port with an overdependence on natural resources. It didn't start building skyscrapers because of a lack of land. It started building them to become a big, thriving metropolis where nowadays skyscrapers make a lot more sense.
As the 2000s rolled on, the bigger and flashier the city could build, the better, following the lead of this enormous tower. It was a watershed moment, not just for Dubai, but for skyscrapers in and of themselves. This chart shows the amount and size of vanity heights on Supertall skyscrapers. Here are the Petronas Towers, and here is what happened after that. But most importantly of all these buildings, these are the ones in Dubai.
What Dubai did was leverage the allure of skyscrapers to an extent that no one had ever really done before, and leading all that was the Burj Khalifa. Yes, it was excessive. Yes, it's quite vain, but it worked. Skyscrapers aren't always just office space. They can sometimes become symbols of soft power too, and in this case, help reinvent an entire country.
It created a world of appearances where every metre mattered and skyscrapers would never be the same again. Now, to be fair, Dubai is also home to this, the Index. It's a supertall, it's in Dubai, and with just 4 metres separating its top floor with the building's peak, it also holds the record for the smallest vanity height of any skyscraper above 300 metres, measuring just 1% of its overall structure. Now, does that contradict everything we've just said? Possibly. Yes. No. Who knows? That is one for the comment section. The explosion in vanity heights might be a recent phenomenon, but the battle to build big has never been a fair fight. That brings us to number 4, the Chrysler Building.
There's just something about skyscrapers and disaster movies, isn't there?
Anyway, forget Dubai for now. Wind back 100 years, and the original race for the skies was steaming ahead in Manhattan, after the island seemed to have found an infinite money hack. Competition to hold the prize of the world's tallest skyscraper was intense, and in 1929, the one to beat was this, the Woolworth Building. Walter Chrysler was busy working on a soaring 65-story Art Deco sky palace that would stand taller than any of its neighbours.
That was until George L. Ostrom entered the chat.
Shortly after ground broke on the Chrysler Building, Ostrom came up with a plan for a shorter 47-story building a few miles away at 40 Wall Street. Then he quickly came to his senses and fired the starting pistol on one of the most infamous rivalries in skyscraper history. Ostrom jacked up the size of his tower, beating the Chrysler Building by 9.8 metres. With construction already well underway, the Chrysler Building was redesigned to be 282 metres high, which prompted Ostrom to raise his tower to 283 metres.
I know, right?
It looked like 40 Wall Street had the edge, but Chrysler had a trick up his sleeve. His architect William Van Allen quietly gained permission to plant a 38-metre spire on top of the Chrysler Building. To complete the subterfuge, the spire was built in secret inside the roof, and over the course of a dramatic night in October 1929, the spire was lifted up and installed on top of the new Chrysler Building. The final height was taken to a massive 319 metres, dwarfing the puny 40 Wall Street. Walter Chrysler had built the world's tallest building, but more importantly, he had won.
But it wasn't just Ostrom who was looking at Manhattan's skyline with envy.
In the 1920s, Joseph Stalin was taking an interest in remodelling Moscow, and he was determined to build something every bit as tall and grand as Uncle Sam had to brag about over in the US. And that determination has given us the number 5 on this list, the Ukraine Hotel in Moscow. The Burj Khalifa might have the biggest overall vanity height, but this Soviet gem holds the record that nearly stops it from being a building at all. Let me explain. The Ukraine Hotel was one of several skyscrapers in Moscow commissioned by Stalin, known today as the Seven Sisters. But if you look at the footprint, it's very different from what you'd expect from a skyscraper. Rather than being a solid block, it curves around in a U shape with a courtyard in the centre. Clearly, they weren't hard-pressed for space. Legend has it the hotel was originally designed with a flat roof, but Stalin wasn't happy with this. American skyscrapers have spires, he complained. So should ours. So, in keeping with the proportions of the hotel, a gigantic 73-metre spire was added on top.
Now, the Council on Vertical Urbanism has very strict rules on skyscrapers. At least 50% of their height must be occupiable, otherwise it's not a building or a skyscraper, it's a tower.
That massive spire and the pedestal it sits on gives the tower a whopping vanity height that takes up 42% of the building. Not only does that make the Ukraine Hotel the vainest building by percentage of overall height, it also leaves it a hammer and sickle away from not being a building at all.
Still, if you're an architect and your client is Joseph Stalin, it's best to do what he says.
And that brings us back, of course, to this, the Jeddah Tower. As we saw in New York, nothing drives height like competition. It's probably no coincidence then that preliminary work for the Jeddah Tower began in 2008, just before the neighbouring Burj Khalifa opened for business. While the Burj Khalifa would go on to stand 828 metres above the streets of Dubai, the original plans for the Jeddah Tower were for a 1-mile skyscraper standing 1,600 metres tall. That was quickly dropped because it's absolutely insane. So they switched metric for imperial and started work on a 1-kilometre tall skyscraper instead. The building is designed around a Y-shaped core. That's the same thing you'll see inside the Burj Khalifa and other structures like the CN Tower. It's used because it's the most effective way for the building to cope with the extreme weight of itself and the extraordinary lateral loads created by the wind hitting the building's exterior. But that only takes it so far. From level 167 onwards, the building shuns its concrete core and is being completed in steel. This gigantic structure will contain the ladders that allow maintenance crews to access the aircraft warning beacons at the very top of the skyscraper, the equivalent of 240 stories above the Earth. Climbing that ladder won't be an easy job. Exact measurements haven't been published, but based on the standard floor height, the spire of the Jeddah Tower could be well over 300 metres tall. The vanity heights for this extraordinary building might end up being a Supertall skyscraper in its own right.
Now, I'm not here to tell you what to think about vanity height or to decide whether it's right or wrong. You might think it's a good thing, you might think it's a terrible thing. I guess what I find more interesting is what it says about us and how we build our buildings, because we've always done this right through the ages, from cathedrals, temples, pyramids, all the way up to the more modern skyscrapers we see today. We've always wanted to break that frontier. As human beings, we've wanted to go further and higher, whether that's out of ego, economic gain, or wanting to be remembered long after we're gone. We've always consistently, right through time, looked up to the skies and asked, how high can we really go? This video was sponsored by Rayon Design. Don't forget that you can try Rayon Design for free using the link below. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.